This is a Ducati Monster 696. It's a 2009. It's got a shifting issue. So we're going to go ahead and drop the oil, pull this cover off, and see what we can see with the shifter mechanism in here, and try to determine if it's a problem with the linkage or an internal transmission problem with the shift forks or something like that. So first thing I'm going to do is drop the oil. Take note of which spline your shifter mechanism is on. I put a little tiny punch mark right there so we can get that back in the same spot. Those are adjustable. It's kind of user preference how high or low you like it, but just going to put it back in the same spot. These are almost stripped out. So I'm going to use a stubby Allen impact, a hand impact. These are handy for stuck bolts. Really stuck. I'm going to leave that for now because I can, once I get this off, I can put heat to the back side of that. Try to loosen that up, and I don't think I need to get this cover off. So, see about that though. There's a lot of sealant on there. A bit of oil over there. I'm not sure if that's from the slave cylinder or the cover itself leaking. Let's see what we can do with a dead blow. It is pretty solid. Alright, I'm gonna see what I can come up with here. Okay, I'm gonna try to remove these bolts because once I have this out, that should be the center of the flywheel, and I should be able to use this as a puller to pull this case off since there's so much sealant on it. We'll get this hot. There we go. Got that spinning without stripping out the head. That one's also really tight. These little 4mm Allens don't take a lot of force before they just blow out the center of the Allen. There we go. Yeah, and especially that's hot. These tapered heads, you get so much force on them, just with a little bit of snugness, they easily get stuck. So they don't take a whole lot of foot-pounds to be snug. Alright. So yeah, we should be able to push on that center right there. Give you a good shot of this. You can see in there we've got the center of the flywheel. And then we can use these two holes right here to pull that case outwards. Got some bolts here that should work with some spacers. Popping loose. Oh, catch this oil that's falling before I make a mess. I'll get a piece of cardboard for these bolts over here and just stick them through the cardboard so they stay in that order, so I know where everything goes. Got the stator plug there. So right now I can already see why it won't shift. You can see this arm on the shifter paw. It's kind of hard to see at that angle, but it's come off of the pin, and let me see if I can show you here. Leverage. You can see this mechanism is completely pulled off of the shift drum. Get my fingers out of the way there. But yeah, that's not touching anything right now, so that's not going to shift. So that's our main problem. So let me see if I can get to this stator plug easy. If not, I'll support this cover and we'll keep moving on. Alright, so I've got my bolts all in the cardboard in the right pattern. I've got the case getting ready to lift up here so I can lift up the rear wheel and be able to turn this transmission. A couple things I noticed. So the bolts here, the washers are tightened down so much that this washer is actually split and broken. Same thing with this one over here, it's actually broken. I noticed the spring, a piece of the spring for the detent is laying down in the bottom here, so that means this spring that's on here is broken. So now we have to pull the flywheel off of there and then get this off so I can see what's going on with the broken pieces. There's a couple measurements from Ducati to make sure that this is still in spec, but the biggest thing is I want to turn this shift drum by hand while spinning the rear wheel and make sure that there's no internal transmission problems. If there's not any internal transmission problems, we'll order the update kit for mounting this detent on here. It comes with some new washers, some new bolts, new spring, and I'm not quite sure what else, but they've obviously had some problems with these, so we'll order the update kit, put it back together, and see what we get. So, see if we can get the flywheel off of here. Looks like this is a 30mm socket. I use a chunk of aluminum to stick in between drive gears because the aluminum's much softer than these hardened steel drive gears, and that'll help lock this into position. With the impact, you probably won't need it going off, but that's very helpful going back together when you have to torque it. Looks like this washer is concave, so take note of the way that it goes. That's a type of locking washer. Of course, try to drop it there. So just take note of which way that goes. Now what's nice about Ducati flywheels is there's no puller needed because they're just splined to the shaft. So I'm going to grab a hold of the starter clutch gear in the back, pull this whole thing off. Just trying to look for a reference here. There's a dot on this flywheel. I'm not sure what that lines up with at the moment, but I imagine it might be these cutouts in the shaft. See if I can get everything lined back up here. There's a thrust washer, a gear, a bearing, roller bearing, and a thrust washer. Yeah, so I'll double check in the video, but I believe this dot is lined up with these cutouts on that shaft, so I'll take note of that when I go to put it back together. So this is a one-way clutch. Just make sure that it free spins one way and locks up the other way. That's how the starter motor drives that and turns the engine one way and free spins when the engine's running. Make sure that's working. So yeah, we've got this housing, needle bearing, and thrust washer behind it, and that thrust washer fits on that groove, so you have to make sure you don't have that thrust washer off when you go to torque that down, otherwise you'll snap that in the back. So I'm just going to leave that stuff in place right there. Now we should be able to, yeah, we can see the spring is definitely broken. Piece of it laying in the bottom there. Just get my hands cleaned up a little bit so we can pull off this mechanism here. And it looks like the Allen head is blown out in there. Of course, that makes things difficult. So I might grab the hand impact again. that kind of thing can happen if you're using, these are all metric bolts in here. If you're trying to use standard Allens, you can get this, or if you're just over torque things, Allens can't take a whole lot of force before they start to blow out. So we'll grab the hand impact again. Again, these are really useful because this puts the, oops, that's a 6mm, that's a 5mm. This puts the force needed against it as it's turning. You preload this, and then as you hit it, it moves a little bit to the left each time while you're preloading it. So I'm going to put the extension on there so I get a nice straight shot. So you can see it each time I hit it, it moves just a little bit to the left. Going to give this a good look over. So there's a measurement from Ducati to measure here and here. I'll show you that in just a second when I get the calipers out. And I see just a little bit of damage to the tip of that, but I think we're going to be okay. So So now that I have the D10 out of the way, I can move the shift drum by hand just to make sure we go into all the gears just fine like we should. So you want to kind of spin this back wheel. I'm just going to use a little wrench that was already bent. It's kind of the perfect shape to do this. You can a lot of times just move this by hand, but with a little bit of leverage it makes it easier. So here we are in neutral. We're going to shift down into first gear. So it goes into first gear no problem. So now I'm just going to there's back to neutral. Let me see if I can just... So that would be second. That would be third. Whoop. I lost my place here. So we'll get back to neutral. Okay, so there's neutral. Second. Third. Fourth. And fifth. So no problem, especially doing that by hand. So fourth. Third. Second. And there's neutral. And first is just awkward on the pin, so I just need that little bit of leverage. There we go, there's first. Back to neutral. So yeah, no problem shifting by hand, so I don't think there's any internal problems. It's just a matter of the spring being bent on this detent, or a spring being broken, I should say. And then there's a measurement that they have. Like I said, there's a bulletin on this. I'll put the bulletin up on screen. And show you what number it is. But also in that bulletin they just have a quick measurement for the distance in between these two this shaft right here. Let me get this set up and then I'll put it back on camera. So there we go. So just over 27, which I believe is 27 plus or minus, I can't remember, half a millimeter or something like that, but that's perfectly in spec, so that's good. Those aren't bent. We're equidistant in between those two pieces right there, so this mechanism itself should be fine. The hook's in good shape. Really, we just need to get that update kit. The spring was oriented the right way. You can put this on backwards, but this was correct. It just broke, so we need the kit with the new spring and the new bolts for it. And then when we put this back together, I'll show you how it's gonna go. So you do it in neutral, and all you do is, you can see how this is slotted down here. So there's adjustment for before you tighten down the bolts. So what you do is get this lined up. You're going to get this into place. You can see there's this notch, and you just center that over that pin. So we can, it could be all the way here, all the way over here, and still have those bolts be able to be tightened. So you center it over that pin, and then you would go ahead and tighten down these bolts. So we'll get the update kit for it, put it in, and we should be back to shifting normally.